Today we're diving into the brilliance and, honestly, tragic mind of the composer Robert Schumann. This is a story about a man who was, quite literally, at war with himself. And I mean, just listen to this quote from the man himself. It just perfectly captures the conflict that defined his whole life. For Schumann, this wasn't just about picking a job. It was a battle for his very soul. You see, this internal split, this duality, it started really, really young. Schumann often felt like he was two completely different people packed into one body. So on one side, you have the world of prose and logic, the safe, respectable career in law that his mother really wanted for him. But on the other side, well, that was the magnetic, chaotic, and beautiful world of poetry and music, a world he felt he was absolutely born for. So to deal with this, he did something pretty amazing. He created two fictional characters who were basically his constant companions. You had Florestan, the fiery, impulsive revolutionary, and then you had his total opposite, Eusebius, the quiet, gentle dreamer. And these weren't just pen names, They were the two halves of his personality. And check out this diary entry. It just shows you how real they were to him. He doesn't introduce them as ideas, but as his best friends. For Schumann, his art and his life were completely tangled up, and these two guys were the voices of his creative spirit. Well, eventually, one of those souls just had to win the fight. And lucky for us, the poet chose music. When he was 20, after years of trying to make law work, Schumann wrote this incredibly passionate letter to his mom, basically begging her to let him follow his genius. He staked his entire future on the opinion of just one man, the famous piano teacher Friedrich Wieck. Wieck saw his potential, and just like that, Schumann's life was on a brand new track. But here's the thing, he didn't just want to make music, he wanted to fight for it. So he creates this imaginary society called the League of David, with Florestan and Eusebius, of course, as its star members, and their mission? To wage a holy war through music criticism against the Philistines, the boring, conservative composers of the day. This was his crusade. And you can really see his whole philosophy when you compare two versions of the same piece. On the left, Schumann's take is complex, it's thoughtful. On the right, you've got Franz Liszt's arrangement, which is just a thunderous explosion of technical fireworks. See, for Schumann, music wasn't about showing off. It was about revealing what's going on inside. And through his journal, he became a kind of kingmaker. He was one of the very first to shout from the rooftops that Frédéric Chopin was a genius. He championed the forgotten work of Franz Schubert, and years later he would discover and launch the career of a young Johannes Brahms, literally changing music history forever. Okay, so this brings us to the most creative period of his life, a time when his music was fueled by two explosive forces, an absolutely epic love affair and a fascination with secrets. The love of Schumann's life was Clara Wieck, who just so happened to be the daughter of his own teacher. She was one of the most brilliant piano prodigies in all of Europe. Their love was instant and incredibly intense, but her father, Friedrich, was violently against it. He saw Schumann as this unstable dreamer and forbid them from seeing each other. This led to years of secret letters, hidden meetings, and finally a dramatic court battle just to win the right to get married. So, during this time of all these secrets and forbidden love, Schumann gets kind of obsessed with codes. He loves using this technique called a musical cryptogram. The idea is that musical notes have letter names, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, so you can use them to spell out hidden messages right there in the music. And in his masterpiece, Carnival, he did exactly that. It's so cool. These notes here spell out A-S-C-H. Now, in the German system, S can be E-flat, and H is B natural, which spells out Osh, the hometown of a woman he was briefly engaged to. He wove this secret code, this musical DNA, through the entire piece. It's a hidden love letter in plain sight. He wasn't just hiding names, he was hiding entire stories. His piano cycle, Papillons, which means butterflies, is a literal, note-for-note musical version of the final scene from a novel by his favorite author. It's a whole masked ball full of confused identities, declarations of love, and this bittersweet ending. For Schumann, music was his diary. But here's the tragic part. The same extreme sensitivity that let him translate novels into music and love with such passion, it also held the seeds of his own destruction. The two souls inside him began to tear him apart. As early as his 20s, he was just haunted by this paralyzing fear. He wrote this in a letter confessing his absolute terror of a mental collapse. And this wasn't just a fleeting anxiety, it was a shadow that would follow him for the rest of his life. And tragically, his fears became a reality. The timeline of his decline is just heartbreaking. After a first breakdown in 1833, he suffered another huge collapse in 1844. By 1854, his mind was fracturing. He started hearing music from angels, but also from demons. In a moment of absolute torment, he threw himself into the icy Rhine River. He was rescued, but at his own request, he was committed to a mental asylum, and he died there just 2 years later. So, what was really going on? The medical mystery of his illness is still debated today. His 19th century doctors were convinced it was syphilis, a disease he himself thought he'd gotten as a young man. Modern experts have suggested everything from bipolar disorder to mercury poisoning. We may never know for sure what was tormenting this brilliant mind. So after all that struggle, those soaring highs and devastating lows, what are we left with? An absolutely immortal legacy. Schumann's impact was just immense. He basically taught the piano how to tell stories, blending it with literature like no one had before. He poured his own life, his loves, his fears, his secret codes directly into his work, making it one of the most personal musical statements ever. Through his writing, he literally shaped the sound of his generation. And in the process, his own life story became the very definition of the romantic genius: brilliant, passionate, and tragic. So in the end, that 20-year struggle he wrote about, it found a resolution. His music is the place where his two warring souls, the wild Florestan and the dreaming Eusebius, finally learned to live together, creating a sound that's both fiery and tender, both passionate and so profound. And that leaves us with the ultimate, haunting question. Was the very thing that made his music so deeply human, that extreme sensitivity to love and beauty and sorrow, was that also the very thing that destroyed him? Was his genius inseparable from his madness? That is the enduring mystery of Robert Schumann.